may not know, my name is Dennis Carmen, and I am the president and CEO of the United Way of Greater Plymouth County. I am getting close to completing my 16th year at this United Way. And before I came here, I was fortunate enough to be the director of the Mainspring Coalition for the Homeless. And we, throughout my tenure there, which was about 12 years, were proud members of the United Way. And before that, I was involved in a number of substance abuse programs, both in Brockton and Plymouth. And the reason I go through that is I wanted to provide just a very brief reflection this morning. It is such a challenging time for everyone. And I think we're all suffering from different levels of compassion fatigue. Most of you are out in the front lines working with people. Even if you're remoting, you're often exposed to all sorts of challenges beyond the medical related to the pandemic. It's just it's very difficult out there. But I was listening to NPR this morning, as I often do, and I'm always disappointed, if you will, by the negative nature of most of the reporting of news today. But they happen to have what I would describe as a fairly positive feature piece around recovery. And for those of you who work directly with substance addictions know this is true. It's very difficult work because there are relapses along the way. There's the feeling that so many take a long time before they get it. But what they were reporting at the bottom line was that the overall percentage of people who ultimately find recovery and are working on recovery is significantly like above 75%. Now, when we started in substance abuse, and you may have heard this figure, 1 in 35, I think, according to the Alcoholics Anonymous's big book, recover, which sounds like a terrible percentage and a terrible number. But it was heartening to hear that many people who were being interviewed were people who struggled with addictions and are in some level of recovery. And they were reporting all sorts of things about recovering some family relationships and becoming married and buying houses. And I guess what I wanted to start today's session is by saying thank you for the work that you do, and just don't ever doubt that it isn't life-saving and life-changing, because it is. And whether you're talking about substance addiction or mental health issues or credit counseling for people in order to help them get on their feet financially, working in housing and homelessness, whatever the area, it's vital, valuable work, and you are making a difference. And we're really thrilled about our United Way partners over the years. You're the hands and feet of taking the resources we're trying to generate each year and making a real difference. So thank you for doing that, and thank you for being here. We will begin again with a quote from, we have a new head of the United Way of Worldwide. She is the first woman head of the United Way Worldwide, and she's the first African American. And her quote today is, the question is, how can we work together to create a strategy that supports our mission with tangible metrics and meaningful outcomes? I have to tell you, beyond the messages that Angela Williams has been sending out early into her tenure, she comes with a strong background from Easter SEALs, as well as the National YMCA. She was the CFO there for a number of years. So she comes with an impressive background, and we're very excited about a lot of what her focus is going to be. But I think this quote was particularly meaningful as we approach another year of our allocation process. And as most of you know, and we can move to the next slide, our geography is fairly significant in Greater Plymouth County. It includes the city of Brockton, the very large town of Plymouth, and a lot of towns in between. We, with your help, with the help of a lot of the people who are here today and have been United Way partners, we're able to serve over 60,000 people. And you can see the breakdown by the different towns. And it's a very impressive number, but we wouldn't have been able to do it without your help. as we look at this year's process, we do continue to focus on the three large areas of health, education, and financial stability, but we're focusing our energies on 5 areas, and we're going to have our critical volunteers in this process talk to you in a moment about what those 5 areas are, but they're basically very similar to the ones we had last year. We did a little bit of wordsmithing on some of them in order to make them as relevant today as possible. But at this point in time, I get the pleasure and the honor of introducing to you the co-chairs of our Community Impact Committee of our Board of Directors, Carol Martin from Harbor One Bank and Peter Smith in the community, who's retired but living in Plymouth area. And they are going to talk to you about the need areas that we're looking at and some of the important changes to this year's process. And they're basically coming about because of feedback we've heard from you, our board of directors, and the members of our Community Impact Committee. So Carol and Peter, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Dennis. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with all of you today and see so many familiar faces that have participated in this process in the past, as well as some new faces that are going to be thinking about applying for funding from us for the first time. So thank you all for being here today. And thanks to Dennis and Kim for their tremendous work that they do day in and day out for the United Way and to support our members in our community, and how they support Peter and I as well. We really appreciate the work that they do. As Dennis just mentioned on the last slide, the 3 pillars that we focused on in the past are education, health, and financial stability. And in the fall of 2020, the Live United Recovery Fund was established. And last year, during the process of allocations, we focused our efforts and linked the process to the 5 recovery areas. And I'll share those with you in just a moment. But I just wanted to talk about the Live United Recovery Fund for just a moment. And when that fund was established, it was a very thoughtful and mindful look at the communities we serve and how we could really reimage and rebuild our communities impacted by COVID-19. And you know, as I'm thinking about it, who would have thought 2 years later we would still be in the midst of this? But while we continue to emphasize those 3 pillars, we want to continue our efforts on the 5 critical important initiatives of the Live United Recovery Fund. So let me share those with you. And similar to last year, not much has changed with these focus areas: feeding our families, housing and homelessness, access to affordable health services. Last year, one of the focus areas was return to learning. This year, we've named that support for children and youth. Similar focus. It's really about learning, development, education for our children and youth in our communities. And then last year's job training and placement area, we called that Aspire to Hire. But again, the focus of that is really skill development, encouraging adults to get the skills that they need in order to get jobs and secure jobs in our community. So those are the 5 focus areas that we're going to be looking at again this year. So Kim, if we could go to the next slide. In regards to some of the things that we go through in regards to the allocation process, we're looking for innovative partnerships and collaboration amongst our community partners. And you know, one of the things that we know about all of you is your work that you do, the compassion that you have for the citizens of our community, whether it's individuals or families, the charitable work that you do. And as Dennis said earlier, we thank you for all that you do to support individuals day in and day out. And certainly, we all understand the long-term effects of COVID-19, and I'm sure all of us are feeling a little bit of COVID fatigue for all of us as we hit almost the 2-year mark into this. the critical work that you do and the things that we see in the community are really important. We have aligned with Angela's quote, but a lot of what Angela Williams brings to this process is about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And certainly the United Way, Greater Plymouth County, we're aligned with what United Worldwide is messaging in regards to diversity, equity, inclusion. The staff, the board of directors, we certainly understand and are sensitive about the issues relating to race, equity, and justice within our communities. We understand that people with diverse backgrounds may have greater challenges, and their issues may be of greater complexity. So we certainly want to support that. One of the things we created this year with United Way is a diversity, equity, and inclusion statement that we have out there for everyone to see. And it was an important strategic initiative that we worked on this year as a board as well. And Kim will talk about this a little bit later on when we get into the forms, but we're hoping that as part of the process, you will include your diversity, equity, and inclusion statement as part of your profile when you complete your forms this year. We feel it's important that people contribute in regards to how they view equity and inclusivity within our community. So hopefully you'll be sharing those with us as well. I think that's everything that I had on these slides. I'm going to turn it over to Peter. And I want to welcome Peter. He's attended in the past, but he is newly appointed the co-chair of the Community Impact Committee. So I'm excited to partner with Peter and be on the same team as him. So I'll turn it over to you, Peter. And again, thank you everyone for the wonderful work that you do in our communities. We truly appreciate it.
Great, thanks, Carol. And yeah, this, as Carol mentioned, this is my third year participating with United Way of Greater Plymouth County. So the first 2 years were as a panelist and last year as a captain. So I recognize several of you from reviewing your proposals last year. Good to see you again this year. So we've got a couple slides that just talk about some of the changes this year, and then the next one will reinforce the changes that we put in place last year. So the two slides really send a great message that we're committed to continuous improvement, and we're working to streamline and simplify the process for all of you. And hopefully you'll see that in the two slides here. First, it's going to be a one-part submission process. So in the past, you did one submission communicating your organization and another submission communicating your proposal. So combine those, and we're just making it one submission, and we've got a calendar coming up that'll tell you the date as far as that's concerned. We've also gone from 4 forms to 3, so hopefully that'll simplify the process for you, and they should look pretty familiar to you from prior years. And then also the section on the collective impact indicators, more standardized set of outcomes that you'll see in that section of the proposal. And we've actually got some tips for you on how to make that effective and streamline that section. We've also increased the partnership compliance score from 5 to 10 points. And that should send a pretty clear message that the whole process of collaborating with us and with other organizations is really important. And it just reinforces that we're better as a team than working individually. Next slide just talks about kind of reminders of the changes we made last year and are still in effect for this year. So the number of initiatives stays at 1 per focus area, and that goes back to the slide 6 that Carol talked about, our 5 focus areas. So we've got 1 submittal per focus area with a maximum of 5 submittals for each agency. And then we're looking to fund up to as many as 50 initiatives. The range for each request remains the same, minimum of 5,000 and a maximum of 30,000 per initiative. And then also the requirement for 1 year in operation, including your financial statements, still holds. And then also just this year, we're going to once again do all of the reviews virtually. This will be year 3. And I've been involved with every 3 years, and I can tell you that the first year was pretty clunky as far as doing the reviews virtually. But last year, I thought it was just went a lot smoother and a lot more impactful. So I think we made great progress on that. And as everybody gets used to doing things by Zoom, we're getting better at that process. So, so I think it'll be good again this year doing it virtually. And finally, just a submission. You need to have all the submission forms and attachments sent in by hard copy. And then as far as the proposals themselves, have those emailed to Kim. And that really helps Kim to email those in because she needs to forward those on to all the panelists and think that we've got all the proposals that need to be sent out to over 50 panelists and whatnot, to having those sent in electronically really helps. All right, turn it over to you, Kim.
I think it's coming back to me, Kim.
Yeah,
correct?
sorry, I was on mute.
That's
Yes,
okay.
please, Dennis.
That's all right.
Please carry on.
That's all right. Peter and Carol, thank you so much. It can't be said enough times that the United Way only works because we have a ton of volunteers who are very often behind the scenes. And so we have a community impact committee that basically oversees the allocation process and the distribution of funds that is connected to our board of directors, who also have ultimately the final decision-making over who gets funded and where funding goes. But it is rare that they ever change any of the recommendations from the Community Impact Committee. And then when you add in the number of allocation panelists on a given year, you're talking over 75 people who are volunteers who make this process work. So Peter and Carol, particularly thank you. I thank our board of directors and all of the allocation panelists who come and do this year in and year out. We have a nice mix of people who do it every year and have done it in some cases for 10 or 12 years. And we have new people coming every year. So there's a nice mix of volunteers doing it. So I get to go through the partner compliance agreement. This has not changed, so it will sound familiar to some of you who have been doing this for a long time. But the United Ways has partnership compliance, co-branding, and fundraising standards and policies that are really intended to both provide mutual marketing benefits and to fully support the annual fundraising campaign. United Way and our volunteers will be monitoring some of these things as we go forward. Among those things, co-branding requirements, it is really critical for United Way to remain visible in the community, especially as we go out to try to raise dollars. So signage, logo usage, on websites, United Way of Greater Plymouth County will provide the window decals, signs, and electronic logos whenever you need them. Kim has been terrific about making sure whenever you have requests for specific ones, and we have vertical, horizontal, in color, black and white, all sorts of variations on it to hopefully go in line with whatever print materials you might have, whatever your websites are, but it really, really helps us to see that visible co-branding relationship. There are reporting requirements when you're involved in United Way and applying for United Way dollars. There are year-end reports that include demographic information, success stories, and outcomes. And as mentioned, you will note the year-end report will probably include some additional questions around what are the ethnic and racial breakdowns, by age and gender, so that we get a sense of who you're serving with United Way dollars. And the truth of it is, again, in order for us to know where we stand in terms of the equitable distribution of resources over different diverse populations, we need to know what those baselines are. Many of you have been doing this work for years. When we fund agencies and organizations, it is always with the understanding that you are serving those people who are most in need. So we talk about in terms our target group of being the 15% of the population of lowest income. That very often coincides with people from diverse backgrounds. But we want to start getting a handle on where our resources are going to make sure that we are equitably distributing resources to those folks who are most in need. There are partnership events with the United Way and activities that are required. We have monthly agency executive meetings that are terrific opportunities for our community partners to share information about what they're doing, not only just with United Way dollars, but what they're doing in general. Very often we hear from executives and program managers of the different community partners we have, where they have projects that everyone might be able to help with. For example, when we do a blood drive, we're looking for all of your support to help out. And many of our partners are looking to do similar activities where they need hands and feet, they need volunteers, they need support. So these are good meetings to go to in and of themselves, but they are a requirement of being a United Way partner. Our annual meeting, it's similar. Most of the time, and most of you who have been there know that during our annual meetings, we thank the companies and the individual donors who are giving to us. It is really a strong statement to have our community partners front and center in that process, so that the people who know who are contributing their resources, they can see the people who are actually the ones behind leading those organizations and making the good in the community. We also ask people to be at our kickoff, which is often including a day of caring. Obviously, the pandemic has caused us to have some issues. So this time we did finally go back to an in-person kickoff. Thank you to so many of you who were at our kickoff. We had a successful blood drive where we literally had 35 people donating blood. You all know, and I'm going to be repeating this as the rest of the staff, we are at a critical juncture with the supply of blood in our communities. We are under a day where we don't have more than a day's worth of blood supplied. And as you've heard, people are flocking to the ICU units for the COVID situations, and all sorts of other medical needs are being challenged, including having enough blood for transfusions and other, when people have accidents and whatnot. We really need to make sure that there's enough blood. So we've done 2 blood drives. There will likely be there is a third one coming up the end of February, and we will let you know where that's going to be. Oh, the Plymouth Public Library, as a matter of fact, is where that's going to be on. What's the date, Kim? Please help me out, because I jumped into the making this.
Friday, February 25th. And we're just going to visit that library later this week to confirm the location, and then we'll start spreading the word widely.
Excellent. Thank you. So again, it's required that our funded partners are part of United Way activities, including things like annual meetings, kickoffs, and other days of caring. And then we ask everyone to register with an electronic platform for volunteers called Volunteer South Coast. We do it in partnership with the other 2 United Ways in the area. And it's important because it allows us to have a very healthy donor base when agencies are looking for volunteers, and when people in the community are looking for opportunities to connect with your organizations. And then, of course, the employee campaign for United Way. All people who are receiving all organizations who are receiving United Way funds are required to run a United Way campaign. Many of you are smaller and volunteer-driven organizations, and we're not expecting miracles. We're just making sure that you give all of your employees the opportunity to give to United Way. We've tried to find some creative ways to have other nonprofits make presentations, so you don't feel, as the head of the organization very often, or as the leaders in organizations, that you always have to kind of ask these things. We've had other agencies come in, make a presentation of how United Way has helped them, and so therefore the ask becomes more effective. Some of you have been terrific, run the best United Way campaigns ever. Others struggle with it, but it is a requirement, and we want to make sure for anybody who's not been familiar with United Way that is something that's really, really important. to do. Okay, at this point, I want to move in to some important points about the application and some tips for folks. These are very similar in the past. We begin with something that sounds obvious these days, but it still is, it's a struggle for many, is that United Way is always looking for some measurable outcomes, ways that we can look toward the work that you do and say it's incredibly successful, so that an investment by someone, a company, an individual can be actually seen and felt and understood. So we're really looking for measurable outcomes. They increase the effectiveness of your work to improve lives, communicates the value of your work in the community, and helps the United Way to raise additional resources. So make your outcomes clear, brief, and direct. Please also be aware of the collective impact indicators this year, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we move through the situation. As I've mentioned, the process is volunteer driven. Each RFR will be reviewed by a team of volunteer allocation panelists. Please assume that the panelists don't know anything at all about your initiative. Even some cases where you might have had a same allocation panelist who reviewed you last year and your proposal might not have changed, you don't want to assume that they already know. And I say that because there are times when important information that you need to convey to the volunteers hasn't been conveyed and they don't get all the information they need. They're typically, when they review the narratives for your initiatives, they're going to be matching what they're reading with what they're seeing at the site visits. And if there are things that don't connect and we don't have a full conversation about it, sometimes the scoring is affected in a negative way. So please be aware of that. Encourage the volunteers to, we encourage you to communicate any questions that they may have. So we say to the allocation panelists, don't be shy, ask the programs, because very often you won't know if they have a question if they don't actually ask it. You can sometimes look at their eyes and say, okay, you look curious. Can I help you with something? Really try to make sure from the perspective of someone applying for the funds that the volunteer understands and has had every opportunity to ask questions. It really is absolutely vital. Subjective elements. This process is subjective. While there is a scoring rubric, there's always going to be a certain amount of subjectivity involved. We do not, when funding isn't distributed, when an application is not going to be funded, we do not share the exact scoring, but we do have opportunities for conversations so that we can talk to an organization and try in general to talk about some of the ways they can improve their application. And we've had many people take advantage of that over the years, improving their applications and then being able to be funded, whereas the year that was under question, they weren't. So there is an opportunity for some dialogue, but we don't reveal the scores. We're in a sense protecting our volunteers. They do provide us with notes whenever there's a low score in an area so that we can convey those statements to the organizations and try to help them, again, to try to improve their applications. Other key points, our volunteers and our donors both agree that local is important. So they need to see that the work you're doing has local impact in the community. If your parent organization is out of the area, that's not a problem, but you need to demonstrate that the resources that are going to be dedicated to the initiative that you're doing is meeting one of those 5 need areas. Also that it is taking into account the diversity of the communities, but it needs to demonstrate some real local impact. That there's targeted need, as I mentioned earlier. We want to see the resources going to the 15% of the community who are struggling the most, who are below, and at that poverty level. And then finally, something that really means an awful lot to us at United Way. We recognize that as talented as your organizations are, and in some cases as large and complicated in a good way that they are, that it's very unlikely that any one organization is going to resolve some of the issues that we have. These 5 need areas are important and difficult in a lot of respects to address. We hope that you will continue to partner with other organizations and demonstrate clearly that you're partnering, because we see that as the part of the solution to actually solving some of our community's problems. So partnerships is absolutely critical. We are, as we mentioned earlier, utilizing video site visits due to the pandemic. Successful video presentations have included simple pre-recorded tours of agency space when possible. It is helpful to pre-record a video and show via share screen during the site visit to help prevent technical difficulties that may occur during live tours when possible. Photos and testimonials from individuals served are also very, very helpful and useful. At this point, unless I've missed a page, and I always worry about that as I'm flipping through them, I am thrilled to turn it over, and I think you're thrilled for me to turn it over to my colleague, Kim Scotland, who's been part of this process for almost a decade at this point, and she really is much more organized in her life than I will ever be in mine. So, Kim.
Thank you so much, Dennis. And thank you again to Carol and Peter for their leadership of Community Impact Committee and this entire process. We're really grateful to have them here and to be in such good company with all of you this morning. I do have to apologize in advance. There's a warehouse behind where I'm set up. And of course, right when I unmuted, I noticed it's getting a little bit noisy back there. So hopefully that's not being picked up. But if you wonder what's the banging noise, it's just the warehouse behind our office space here. So just a couple really quick reminders. We are recording, obviously, so we'll have this presentation available for anyone that may need to watch it again. And we'll also make the slide deck available, so that'll be posted on our website along with the forms. So feel free to take notes, but don't feel that you have to write everything down, because we will be able to reference these again. I'm going to walk through the kind of timeline of things, and then we'll spend some time going through the forms themselves, talk a little bit more about the site visit, and then we'll make sure there's plenty of time at the end for Q&A. If you have any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat, but just hold them until the end, and then we will go over them. So without further ado, as Peter mentioned, we have the 1-part submission process this year, which we're hoping really helps to streamline things for our agencies. So the key date that you want to pay attention to is Friday, February 18th. So all forms and their required documentation and attachments are due to our United Way office. We're located on 934 West Chestnut Street in Brockton, and you're welcome to either pop those forms in the mail or to hand deliver them. If you're familiar with things, we usually keep a box right at the front desk when you walk in. It makes it nice and easy to drop things off, contactless, and kind of this COVID world, nice and safe and simple. So whatever is preferred, you can start bringing those in whenever the collection is ready, due by the 18th of February. We will then have some talented folks from our finance committee take a peek at agency financial information. And if they have any questions or any information is missing or that sort of thing, you will hear from us to get any clarification that's needed before it's handed over to our allocations panelists. On the 8th of March, we'll have our first meeting with our allocations panelists and Carol and Peter in the Community Impact Committee. This is when the panelists will get the initiatives that they're reviewing and get to meet their teammates and that sort of thing. And from there, they'll start thinking about getting together a schedule for those virtual site visits. So oftentimes our agencies will ask, when will I hear from the panelists? I haven't heard from anyone yet, that sort of thing. There's a form called the agency site visit information sheet that's included on the narrative. And we ask that you put down, the specific contact, maybe some good times to see the program in action, virtually, of course, that sort of thing. And you should hear from the team captains by around the end of March. The site visits could take place anytime after that training date. So you may even start having them taking place in March, but they will be happening in March through the end of April. And then the scoring sheets are due back to our United Way at the beginning of May on the 2nd. From there, the Community Impact Committee will look through all of the scores and the comments and the recommendations from our panelists, chat through anything that may come up. They very often go exactly with what is presented from our dedicated volunteers in the community and prepare to present them to our volunteer board of directors. The board will review those recommendations and ultimately vote on May 19th this year on the 2022 to 2023 agency allocations. And then again, sometimes those folks ask when they'll kind of get letters and kind of notification of what their status is. So we will mail letters to every agency with funding notifications, usually around the second week in June. We want to give you enough time to obviously plan for your July 1 start. Okay, so let's get into some of the specifics on the forms. If you've applied in the past, we used to sort of have letters to identify our 4 forms. We've done away with those this year just to kind of make things a little bit simpler and to not have any confusion, as some of the forms would have had their letters changed. So we're just referring to them as their name. So our first form is our organization and eligibility profile. And here you're only going to submit 1 copy of this form and its attachments, regardless of how many initiatives that you plan to apply for. This is just a screenshot of the cover page here on the right side of your screen. Again, you'll bring those in, you'll drop them off, or you'll put them in the mail. We do not need or desire electronic versions of this one, because it's quite a lot of information that you're pulling together. So specifically, we're going to have you submit the following information. So your tax ID number, and we'll use that to verify your nonprofit status on GuideStar's charity checker. As Carol had mentioned, we require a number of different statements, and a new one this year that's really important is having your agency's DEI statement included, your diversity, equity, and inclusion. We also look for your mission statement, a description of your service area, what town specifically are you serving, and which ones in our catchment area will be kind of impacted by the initiatives that you're applying for. And it's also important to have your disability accommodation ADA statement included on that form as well. We will ask for a list of your board of directors and some recent meeting minutes so that we see that folks are active and meeting regularly. And we will ask for your financial information. So your most recent annual certified audit, or your financial statements, and your certificate of solicitation. And just that reminder that we require all of our agencies to be, in action for at least 1 year, and that includes a year of financial information as well. Your IRS Form 990 or 990EZ, your current organization's fiscal budget, and this is the budget for your entire organization. Later on, you'll be giving initiative-specific budgets, but here we're looking for the entire organization's budget, your non-discrimination policy, and then these last 2 are included on the form itself. One requirement we have from United Way Worldwide is to have all of our funded partners sign off on the Patriot Act certification form. So that's just a simple statement that you put in your agency name and have your director and board officer sign off on. And then similarly, Dennis did a great job going through the partner agency compliance agreement. We ask that you read through it again, keep a copy for yourself, sign off on it. And then if you have any materials as a previously funded partner that might have the United Way, maybe logo on a brochure that includes the initiative that's funded, or a newsletter, or a screenshot of your website with the logo, that sort of thing. It's always really helpful to have those 2. Okay, so then getting into the initiative narrative proposal itself, these are the documents that go directly to our allocations panelists. Just reminders, these were covered earlier, but you can submit up to 1 RFP per focus area. So we have the 5, which would mean a maximum of 5 initiatives that you may apply for. We ask that you let us know on the form how much you're requesting, with a range of $5,000 to $30,000. And we ask that you recognize, you might not get the amount that you asked for. It really depends on what's raised and what's available and scoring and that sort of thing. But that's a general range that we look towards. You're going to let us know if it's more of a systemic sort of initiative that's something for the entire community, like a new transportation system, for example, or if it's more of a direct service, helping individuals and families with something more directly in their lives. And then you will just check off at this point which of the 5 focus areas your initiative falls under. So a couple of tips just on the form itself. There are 5 categories on the narrative proposal. We ask that you, of course, type the responses in. Please don't handwrite them. We have gotten that from time to time. that you use bullet point format whenever possible. And this is to make it both easier for you and of course for our reviewers to have things a bit more digestible in that bullet point format. And to please stick with font size 11. Arial is a preferred font that I know we're all very familiar with. We've had some folks in the past really try to squeeze a lot of great information in there, but when you're shrinking the font down to, size 10 and below, sometimes it's challenging to read. So please stick with 11. And then I just wanted to make this red to point it out again. It'll be our second year going over this information, and Peter did a great job sharing it, but we ask that you please email, in addition to giving us hard copies, please email the initiative narrative and the initiative budget. And as I mentioned, that site visit information form is included on the narrative. So in addition to giving us one hard copy, just the one, please shoot those over to my email, and it's written right on the top of the form too, so you don't have to jot that down now. So the first section is that partnership compliance that we went over. If your agency has received United Way funding in the last year, you do not have to put anything in that box. We will, with our volunteer reviewers, come up with your compliance score for the year. If you are new to the process or you haven't been around for a couple of years and now you're reapplying, we ask that you please just briefly describe, how you intend to meet the elements of the compliance agreement. The target population, that one's pretty self-explanatory, but this is a really important one to let us know exactly who you intend to serve with your initiative and your strategy. So information like demographics, any unique characteristics of the population, any specific barriers. And this is another area within our forms this year that we really want you to be mindful of, that diversity, equity, and inclusion element of things. So if you can help folks that were historically disadvantaged or underserved, please feel free to let us know in this section. That would be helpful for our reviewers as well. Next up is your experience and strategy. So what is your specific strategy to meet one of those 5 focus areas? How does it align with your overall organization and your goals? Does it tie maybe to a strategic plan that you put together? How does it relate to your mission? Maybe initiatives that you've worked on in the past that it relates to, that sort of thing. And if you have any specific research or any evidence-based practices that it aligns with, that's always extremely helpful to you to kind of have that background to go along with the initiative itself. Partnerships and collaboration. I think we already talked a few times about how important it is for us to partner whenever we can. And we know that in Southeastern Massachusetts, everyone does an amazing job of partnering. And that's one of the great things we see at those partner agency meetings that we pull together, is how well everyone works together. So here is a section to kind of talk a little bit more about any partnerships that might be directly related to the initiative. And we ask that you're as specific as possible. So say, for example, you have an initiative and you're working with the local school system. Maybe you're working with the counselors in the school system on a behavioral health initiative, for example. We ask that you kind of let us know of that level of detail, of the partnerships with the schools, working with the counselor department, that sort of thing, rather than just saying more in general, we're working with the local school department. It's always great to get a little bit more specific about the partnerships. And then this is not a new section, but this is where those collective impact indicators come into play that we alluded to. So I'll spend a little bit of time going through those. And again, we're welcome to take any questions at the end, but we really wanted to, in partnership with the Community Impact Committee and our board of directors, be a little bit more meaningful in how we define our collective impact, so we can make a larger collective impact altogether in the community, just how it sounds. So we've developed a standard set of outcome measures. They were sort of test run with the year-end reports that were sent out to our funded partners this past summer. And we took any additional categories and feedback into mind when we put together the indicators this year. We also got a lot of them from United Way Worldwide, which has a very large network of other United Ways across the states and internationally, to kind of make sure that they were pulling their community partners. And I would say there are at least 4 or 5, I think it's 5 per category, if not more, underneath those 5 focus areas. But if your initiative does not align directly with some of these indicators, we will allow you to, give us other ideas and make other suggestions as well. You would just check off other, and then you would share a justification on the following page of the narrative form itself. So just to give you a bit more of a flavor, of course, I won't read through all of these, but this is a screenshot of all of the indicators that we have come up with underneath those 5 categories. Again, I think that we did a good job with a lot of impact from the Community Impact Committee, coming up with a pretty comprehensive list, but we would love your feedback if there's something that we're missing, or that sort of thing. There is another category in that please describe underneath all 5. So once you go through and you check those off, then there'll be a box on the following page, still underneath that local impact and outcomes section, where you'll let us know specifically what your outcomes are, either tied to those indicators or in addition to. So, obvious things like how many folks are you intending to serve, but this is where we get into those measurable, specific outcomes that Dennis had alluded to. So we have a couple examples built into the form this year too, just to help folks kind of understand what we're looking for. But for example, not only are we serving 35 youth, but we would like to, through this initiative, increase their reading levels from the 3rd grade to the 4th grade by the completion of the project. So that kind of tells you who we're serving, how many people that we're intending to serve, and then specific criteria that we want to achieve with this project. And I should say, just as an aside, all these great pictures that you're seeing throughout the slideshow are supplied through our partner agencies and kind of give you a flavor for the wide variety of things that we are very proud to be a part of helping to fund. I really like that one of the girl rock climbing here. So then lastly on the narrative, of course, are those site visits that we talked about. And they're really intended just to kind of give our panelists a quick and general overview of your facility, your staff, and the people that you serve. They do not tend to be more than an hour in length. I think in the virtual world, sometimes they might be even a little bit briefer than that, depending on the number of questions that our panelists might have and that sort of thing. But we ask that you just kind of prepare to have some of those photos. Maybe you do have a pre-recorded tour that you can share with folks that kind of gives them a flavor of, this is a space where the initiative takes place, or this is kind of what our place looks like. If you are a previously funded partner and you have some United Way signage up, it's always a lot easier, of course, in person to showcase that. But I think everyone's become very flexible in this virtual world. So maybe just have a picture of that in the tour and the slide deck. So here's a sign we have up on the wall here in this space, that sort of thing. As I mentioned, you should hear from the team captain somewhere around in the month of March, certainly by the end of the month, with some outreach on scheduling those site visits. And we ask that you be as responsive as possible. Our volunteer panelists are all just that, volunteers, and the team captains are balancing the schedule of themselves and 4 or 5 other panelists. So we know you're all incredibly busy too, but we ask that you please, take the time to get back to them as quickly as you can, and certainly within 72 hours for scheduling those site visits. And the other note I wanted to make about the volunteers is some of our allocations panelists do have the capacity to schedule things like Zoom calls, maybe through their workplace or that sort of thing, but some folks do not. So if your agency has the opportunity to kind of schedule the video section of things, and that wouldn't be too much trouble for you, it's always nice to offer that. Occasionally, especially with Zoom being not free after 40 minutes or whatever it may be, changing year to year, it's helpful to have the agencies to help to facilitate that when needed. And then the last bullet point just kind of talks about, again, what Dennis had shared, that it's a great chance to witness the consistency. So they get to read through the narrative, what you're looking to do, and look through your budget, but then they get to hear a little bit more about it from you all at the agency. You can share your perspective, and please always make sure that folks have plenty of time to ask questions and encourage them to ask those questions. We're sticking virtual. I think this is all pretty much just reminders here. Yeah, we really appreciate that. Last bullet point is the one that I want to highlight that we haven't talked about, everyone's flexibility. We know it's been a really, really tough couple of years. I don't think any of us thought we'd still be virtual at this point, but we are really grateful for how well everyone has been and being flexible and creative and making it work. So we thank you for sticking with us this year, and hopefully maybe next year we'll have some kind of hybrid or even back to in-person model for 2023 if we cross our fingers here. We all do the right thing. So the site visits are going to specifically sort of be covering your programming, your staffing, your evidence of collaboration with the community and any partners, the evidence of the folks that you intend to serve, your population served. And then again, if your United Way was funded in the last year, there is a section where our panelists will score on the partnership. These are examples of what our signage looks like. We have window clings, we have indoor, outdoor signs, and we are more than happy to get folks additional copies or that sort of thing if you need any more for your agency, or if you've repainted a wall or something and need some more. Newly funded partners will get these with their award letters. So of course, if you have not received United Way funding in the past year, you will be held harmless and you do not have to worry about that element of things. And then the last form is that proposed initiative budget. So this one is all initiative specific information. All of the revenues and expenses should be tied directly to the initiative that you're funding. It is a grid that has the revenue and expenses with projected amounts, and then there's space at the bottom for a narrative. Please make sure that the budget balances, that your revenues and expenses equal out. If you would like to give us some detail in the narrative, I think it's always very helpful to our panelists to get a little bit more information or clarification, but it's not required that every single line item has a description with it. So if you think that it is self-explanatory or it's a simple sort of thing, you don't have to put all of that information on the narrative, though it is there if you need it. And then agencies and initiatives that are funded in the year-end reports, we ask that you let us know of your actual initiative expenses and revenues once the year has completed. These two changes are not changes, these two guidelines we set a couple years back just because we had gotten some questions from folks about both including in-kind information on the budget and kind of what United Way thinks of capital expenditures related to the budget for funding. So the short answer is yes to both. For in-kind support, of course, we absolutely welcome folks to let us list or to let you all list any in-kind support that you have for the initiative. We just ask that you meet the accounting standards and that you have it again balanced on the budget. So if you have revenue coming in as an in-kind, we also want to have that expense section filled out to balance that. And then when it comes to capital expenditures, and by that we mean any improvements perhaps to technology or things that you want to change to the building, or maybe furniture for a space where groups are meeting, that sort of thing. We do allow those on the budget. Those are up for consideration. We just ask that you keep in mind our mission, and I think all of your missions of really improving lives. So make sure that those capital purchases that you might have on the budget directly relate to that main mission of helping people. And when you receive the year-end report, if you submit an initiative with capital expenses, we ask that you let us know still how many people you've served, even if it is something like getting new computers or that sort of thing. So the forms themselves will be posted right on our website as they have in the past. They are not up yet. We wanted to put them up right after the presentation this morning. So I would say later this afternoon, you'll be able to go right to our site, which is that red text there, UWGPC, as in United Way of Greater Plymouth County.org/funding. There's also a funding link on the footer menu. So any other page you're on our website, you can get back to the funding page by clicking it there. We will have these slides, we'll probably have the recording, and then of course we'll have the forms themselves and a brief cover page with some of the instructions written out. And then you have the contact info for me and Dennis. Feel free to reach out with us with any questions that you have. We will do our best to be as responsive as possible. It's always great to hear some of the creative things that you're all thinking of as you put things together. So we're here if you have questions. And then the last thing we have is just a huge thank you. I know you've heard it a couple of times, but it bears repeating. We're so grateful to have such an awesome group of partners in our region. And we thank you for taking the time to come out this morning and listen to our presentation and for all that you do. This is a picture from our kickoff that Dennis mentioned, where we were so grateful to have some people actually come out in person as we're celebrating our 100th year at United Way. So if you didn't come out and get a t-shirt, we have plenty of t-shirts left and we'd love to get more people on as we'll be celebrating all year round. So at this point, I'm going to stop sharing and we will open it up to any questions that folks have. I think I see a note in the chat. I can quickly skim through that to see if I'm missing anything, but please feel free to unmute or to, put your hand up and we will be glad to answer any questions. Yes, we'll be sending out a copy of the slides. Sorry for being late on that one. And I think that's about it for the chat.
I would agree, though, with Kim. It's lovely to see all your faces, and I really can't say enough times how much we appreciate all the hard work that you're going through these seemingly unending times. But I do think there's light at the end of the tunnel, and I think we'll get there eventually. But please feel free to ask us any questions now, or if they occur to you afterwards, we're happy to respond to whatever questions you might have as we begin this important process.
Thank you all again. Thank you again to Carol and Peter for being here this morning and for being awesome co-chairs of our committee. And thank you all for all you do.
Thank you very, very much.
Take care.
Guys, take care.
Thanks,
Stay-
everyone.
Stay
Thank you,
healthy
everyone.
and stay safe.